So for this particular design, you're going to need your metal cookie cutters, or if you have a silicone round mold, you can use that as well. If you're using the cookie cutters, I like to use the shiny silicone mat so that any parts of the front of the Freshie that's showing are shiny. I do recommend on going a little bit smaller. When I first started doing cardstock Freshies, I think the circle was 4 inches across. These are 3. Since I've gone to a smaller size, they seem to be selling a lot better. So my recommendation is the 3-inch metal or silicone mold, metal cutters or silicone mold. You're gonna need your tying string, whatever you use to string up your Freshie at the end. Of course, your beads. I've already colored these. I've covered it so many times in other videos. I just didn't feel like I needed to include that in this one. Bubblegum beads. These are 20mm beads. I get them from Pop Lollies. I will put that link in the description. What I love about that company is that I can buy the individual beads. I don't have to buy 10 to 20 of the same bead. Like, they allow you to purchase just a single bead in whatever color or design you want and go up from there, which when you're dealing with a lot of different cardstock designs and colors and things of that nature, it's super helpful to have a huge variety of beads to coordinate with those different cardstocks, designs, or whatever you're doing with your Freshie. It doesn't necessarily have to be cardstock. And then of course you do need your cardstock. I recommend when you size your cardstock to get it almost to the edge of the cutter. This one actually is a little bit smaller than I really like. This one here is a little bit closer to the edge, which I feel like the closer to the edge the cardstock comes, the better it sells. I'm not sure why, it just seems to be how it's working out for me. Next, you'll need ribbon of different designs and even sizes. It adds dimension when you layer with a little bit thinner ribbon on top of a thicker one. You don't have to do that though. It's just what I'm doing here and what I think looks the cutest. You're gonna need some eye screws. These are 1 inch. They came off of Amazon. I will link that in the description below. A little piece of thread. I use button thread because it's a lot thicker and more durable. You're gonna need a thicker thread for this because it's what we're gonna be using to get our jute or your elastic string or whatever through the holes of the bubblegum beads. So it needs to be strong because you're really gonna yank on it. Then you just need a lighter and a pair of pliers. So of course, the first step is to bake the actual Freshie. Now, when I started doing my cardstock Freshies, I would bake the Freshie and then I would hot glue the cardstock onto the front. I am no longer doing that. That didn't seem to do very well. So now I am placing the cardstock down in the cutter first before baking, and it just literally bakes it onto the flat side, which could also be referred to as the back, but it becomes the front when we do it this way. So I'm just going to lay it face up. When I'm using cutters, I want to make sure the seam is at the bottom. It doesn't really matter all that much. It's just kind of the way I'm particular. Make sure that I get the cardstock center. And once I feel like it's in a good place, I hold it down with my little mica spoon. You can use a pen, pencil, whatever you have at your disposal. And then I just pour the beads right on top. I level them out. And as you can see, I don't put a hole in it because we've got those eye screws that we're going to be putting in there. So you don't actually have to put a hole through your cardstock or in the Freshie. All right, next one. So for this one here, you can see it's not a perfect circle, but it does fit within the boundaries of my cutter. Just showing that you don't always have to use just a plain round cardstock. You can do other little things, but same thing, just going to get it in there and position it so that it looks pretty center and in a good spot. And we're going to pour the beads over. And here's another example of not needing to cover the entire front with the cardstock. You can still leave part of the beads exposed as part of the design. So with this one, I'm gonna put it down where I want it, get it placed, and then I'm actually gonna throw down a little glitter. And now I'm gonna pour my beads on top. All right, and last one is a regular round. And it's easier when you're trying to get it centered to move the cutter as opposed to try to scoot the cardstock around. So it's just a little tip. And now that we have all this done, I'm gonna go ahead and get it in the oven, and we'll come back once I'm ready to demold them and start decorating. Okay, now let's start demolding, and I wanted to include this in this video just because I know a lot of people struggle to get the freshies out of the cookie cutters. So I just wanted to go over how I do it. Like, you don't wanna start in the center and push out. You're gonna end up bending your cutter. Always put your fingers as close to the edge as you can get and gently press and work your way around just to separate the edges. And then once you get that, I kind of push like this with these fingers pushing out, and I go around and it pops out super easy. All right, so typically at this stage I would come in with scissors and trim this up, but for the sake of this video, we're just gonna move past it. I'll do it after it's completely decorated. Next, we are going to add the eye hooks in the top of each one. To start these, I like to kind of eyeball it and see where I want it, and then make a mark with the eye hook by just screwing it in a little bit. All you need to do is apply a little bit of pressure and twist, and it should go in there pretty easily. And then once it's started, I just pull it up so that it creates kind of like a little flaw that I can look for once I'm ready to get this in. Now, I know a lot of people just screw these all the way in and call it a day, and that might be fine. I'm a little bit more of an anxious person, so I feel like anything I can do to help keep this thing in there, because sometimes these freshies will melt off of the eye hook. I think, you know, it helps me sleep at night a little bit. So what I do is I take my eye hook, I hold it with a pair of pliers, and then I will heat it with the lighter for about 15 to 20 seconds. And then I find my little spot that I made. And then start gently pushing it in there. And then once it's in, I apply a lot more pressure, and you can see it sinking down. And then I just take the pliers and I fold over any bubbled over beads that are still melted and kind of push it in towards the center so it creates a little cover over the eye hook. Now, I don't know if this actually helps in the long run to keep it from melting and pulling out. But like I said, anything that I think could possibly help, I'm willing to do the extra step for that. I think a lot of us have a huge fear of these melting in a customer's car, and I understand that. I've never had one melt. This is the first summer that I'm actually using these little eye screws. So we'll see how it goes. I've got a couple in, you know, my family members' cars and friends' cars that I've made sure have more of a potential to melt, and they are aware of that. They know that they're test/guinea pigs. You know, I make them black Freshies with these eye screws just to really test them, and they know to contact me as soon as they do, if they do. If I can get through the summer and none of them have a problem, I will be able to relax a lot better next summer. Now we've got that part done. First one I'm gonna do, because I'm not doing a bow for it, it's the easiest one, I'm just gonna go over that one first. So we're gonna get whatever string you use, whether that's elastic or this twine, and we're gonna measure out the length. We need it to be, I'm gonna cut it to that length. I'm gonna double it over and make a loop on the end. Now this is our center, and I'm gonna hold it there. Now I'm gonna take the button thread, and I'm gonna thread one end of it through the loop. And I'm gonna pull it, you can kind of see where I've used it over and over again. It's kind of got a center mark, so I'm just gonna pull it and I'm gonna hold that in place. Now we've got this thread here. I wrap it around my fingers to shorten it up a little bit. And then I'm just gonna take my bead and I'm gonna put both ends of the thread through the bead, pull it down, and then that helps to slide that twine right through, instead of trying to get the ends in there and it fraying and it not fitting. So now we've got this here. I'm just coming through the back of the eye screw, and then I'm gonna bring it up over the bead and pull it tight. Now, some beads will slide around a lot more than others. When that happens, I just put a small knot right above the bubblegum bead so that it doesn't slide around or come off when they take it out of the bag. Because if the bead were to slide off, customer would never be able to get it back on these strings. So that's the first one. Super simple, super cute. Now moving on to the ones with bows. So I'm gonna go ahead and string my bead and then set this aside. So just like I did before with the thread, bring it through. Really makes it super simple, and sometimes it's harder to pull through than other times. Like this one is pretty tight, but really doesn't matter. You can pull hard enough on the thread. That's why this thread needs to be really strong. All right, so I've got that done, and I'm gonna set it aside for a minute. I'm gonna bring my ribbon over. I'm at the end of this spool here, so we're gonna go ahead and cut that off. Now I want two strips of this ribbon. So I usually measure to about the edges, about the width of the Freshie. And it looks like this is gonna be pretty close. So I'm just gonna fold it in half and cut it in the center, since I'm on the last piece here. Okay, so now we have two small sections of that ribbon. And I'm gonna do a section of this more narrow ribbon. And I'm gonna cut it just a tad bit shorter on each side than the first ribbon. Doesn't have to be exact or precise, just somewhere where the ends of the larger ribbon show. So I'm gonna do one black one, and then I'm also gonna do a brown one, and I'm just gonna cut this the same length that I did the black. All right. Now that we have all our ribbon pieces, this one we're using 4 total, 2 thick, and they don't have to be the same. It just depends on whatever design, cardstock design you're using and how you want it to look. So we're using 2 of the thicker and 2 of the thinner. And I'm gonna fold it in half, and then I'm gonna cut from the fold out to the edges to create a slant, so that when I open it up, it has this little arrow triangular type shape. So folding and then cutting from the fold up towards the edge at an angle. And I'm going to do that for every piece. And this is kind of like a plastic ribbon, so it doesn't really fray. That end kind of did when I cut it. So I'm just gonna burn those edges so that it looked a little bit nicer and cleaner. For this type of ribbon, which is go grain ribbon, I'm going to, with these a little bit separated, just run the lighter over it so it doesn't fray. The easiest way to do that is to hold the fold after you cut it. Once it's opened up, it's really hard to get that center spot without making the angle misshapen. And you want to make sure they're not touching, otherwise you will melt the 2 folded ends together. You have to pull it apart or recut it. Sometimes when you pull it apart, it kind of rips at the ribbon and causes it to look frayed again. All right, so now that we have our pieces of ribbon, so I kind of left out one of the supplies in the beginning of the video, which is this button thread. It's the same thread that I use to string my beads with, but I'm gonna also use it to hold my bow together. So you'll need some kind of thread. Probably the stronger the better. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna crisscross my 2 thick pieces of ribbon first, and then I'm gonna go the opposite direction of the first one. So I don't want it to lay flat the same direction. I want it to come across so that they're staggered and layered. So that's the first piece of narrow ribbon, and then I'm gonna lay the second piece of narrow ribbon down. I'm gonna hold it all in place. This is how it should look. And then I'm gonna kind of make sure it's a little more center. That doesn't look exactly center to me. And then I'm gonna fold it in towards the middle and then fold the edges back out. And I'm just gonna pinch it. Sometimes the ribbon can kind of come loose a little bit. That's fine. You can adjust it once you've got your thread around it. Now I'm gonna take my thread and I'm just gonna wrap it around a few times, tightly. And once I've got that, I'm going to cut the other end of my thread. I'm gonna flip the bow over, and I'm just gonna do the very first knot, kind of like you're tying your shoes. just once because I want it to be a little bit loose so that I can make any adjustments that I need to. And if it's super tight, I won't be able to do that. So right now the bow is looking okay to me. So I'm gonna tighten this up and then I'm gonna do another knot. And then just for safety's sake, just a third knot. And then I'm gonna cut the ends of my thread off. So now we have the little bow that's going on our Freshie. And next step is I'm gonna take the string with the bead already on it, come back through. And then before I bring this up over the bead, I'm gonna put my bow right in front here. Thread my bead through. And I'm gonna pull this tight down around the bow. And you might have some adjusting and, you know, straightening to do once you've got it all on there. So here, I push my bead all the way down, and then anytime I add a bow, I'm definitely gonna add a top knot above the bead to keep the bead from sliding up, because if the bead slides up, it's gonna lose tension on that bow, and then the bow's either gonna become really crooked or could come out altogether. And that right there, you can adjust, you can move the bow a little bit like in front of the eye hook, but that's basically what we've got there. These have been a huge hit. They are really cute, and they're probably one of the more simple things that I do. So I'm glad that people like them. The simpler, the better. So here's same thing. This is not a go grain ribbon. This actually has wire in it. It still works. So I'm just gonna cut two. This bow I'm gonna do a little bit different. I'm actually not gonna cut two of these. Actually, I am. Scratch that. I'm cutting two of these. And then I'm just gonna cut the same length, brown one. So for the wired ribbon, because it acts funny with the wire in there, I'm gonna find the wire and I'm gonna pull it out. Because that'll make the ribbon more manageable and easier to arrange. Okay, but same thing, we're gonna fold it over, we're gonna cut the ends off at an angle. Okay, and for this one, I'm gonna cross these two over, and then I'm gonna put this one straight across the middle. So the bow will have a little bit of a different look to it. And everything else I'm doing is the same as the first one we did. This piece is a little messy, so I'm gonna clean this up a little bit. This bead is a little messy on the inside of the hole here, so I'm struggling to get my string through. Got it. All right, there's the next one. And you can mess with the bows so it looks like they sit more on top, or you can kind of bring the tails in front a little bit, just depending on how you like it. Your customer may even arrange it differently once they've got it in their car. And the last one we have, I'm gonna be doing a bow very similar to the first one we did. I'm gonna do it a little bit smaller this time so you can see what it looks like with a smaller bow. So. So once again, gonna cross these two over and then stagger them, laying them the opposite way as the first two. And then kind of make sure they're centered up. Holding together and then out. And that's it.